Sitting outside my house here on Walnut, trying to stay underneath the lights, so hopefully that doesn't kind of blind you guys as far as that goes. But we'll kind of see if we get some people trickling in. Otherwise, we'll kind of share this on the election page as far as that goes. Just got back in from a 2-hour candidate forum where candidates for seats 1, 4, and 5 met to sort of, have a moderated debate. Everyone got the same questions to kind of share their version of how they would tackle certain issues that the city has at this point. And we can kind of go through some of those. I don't want this to be too long of a situation, but first off, I want to give a thanks to Nancy Runge and everyone associated with the chamber, Ms. Brown, as the president, or the chairperson. And so overall, very appreciative. It's a well-run event. The moderator, Mr. Thomason from OG&E over at Ada, was absolutely fantastic. I thought they were great questions, and I really felt like the citizens that were in this, very well attended, felt like, and it was a lively, sort of event. And I felt like, folks were able to learn about their candidates and their associated issues on different topics. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, and some of the things that I think maybe separate me from some of the others in regards to seat 5. I'm running against Jeff Satterley and Kevin Driscoll, great guys, but I'm running against them for seat 5. So I think it's important to know that as people are looking at candidates for certain seats. And so I'm going to specifically speak to, those candidates in this elected position as we kind of go forward. And so I'm going to kind of look at, like the agenda items that were sort of there. And we'll kind of go through a little bit of the questions. Each one of us was able to talk a little bit about like who we are, why we're running, as far as that goes. And I think we've sort of covered that to some extent in the previous YouTube Live. But again, I don't mind sort of summarizing succinctly to say that I think that, I'm from Pauls Valley. Pauls Valley's home. I've had a lot of opportunities to be able to leave. Work related, it would make much more sense for me to be based out of Norman, Oklahoma City. Same thing with my wife working at the University of Oklahoma. However, Pauls Valley's home for us. Where our kids love it here. Love the school, love the activities, love the people. And so that's what sort of kept us here. And so if I'm going to feel that way, I want to serve. And I think that you guys know in different capacities I've been involved, that I've been of service, whether it's through chamber, whether it's through church, whether it's through band boosters, whether it's through the Pauls Valley Tennis and Racket Association, whether it's through Pauls Valley Parks Foundation. I feel like those are avenues that get your appetite whet for something more. And certainly them by themselves is more than enough. And so from that perspective, I think that's a huge component. The other thing that I sort of espoused, have a tremendous amount of business experience. Physical Therapy Central, we started with 1 clinic 20 years ago, currently have 37, partnered with an additional company, Redbud Physical Therapy in Tulsa in 2016. We have, 51 clinics, 450 staff, 150 therapists across the state, doing high-level things. And I feel like, we're dealing with multi-million-dollar budgets and revenue expense line items. Looking at budgets and balance sheets, projections, and making modifications and adjustments similar to what the city's doing is definitely nothing foreign to me. And I feel very much in my element. And I hope that was conveyed and understood through some of the questions tonight. So we'll kind of go through a little bit some of the questions that we talked about, from the forum, one of which was, how do you plan to ensure transparency and accountability in city government? And what I had sort of said, and this will be a repeat for anyone that was at the meeting that, heard, but I think it's important to say, it may be one of the most important things that I'll say all night, is that transparency on the city council is absolutely paramount. And again, the fact that I'm using YouTube Live right now to sort of promote that, this is 100% something that the city can use for all of their meetings, whether it's city council, whether it's planning and zoning, whether it's beautification, any of those organizations can utilize this technology, and it's for free. It doesn't cost the city anything. And it can be transcribed, it can be kept, it can be something that people can go back and look if they can't make the meeting. So one, I think we 100% need to have a medium. And again, this one is great, it's free for transparency and accountability. The other aspect that is really key to my campaign and what I've been telling people is that public comment on associated agenda items for the city council is an absolute must. Now, posting the agenda on the Friday before the Tuesday meeting is great. However, I feel like that needs to go on to the actual website. Now, an additional thing, and I'm all about practical solutions for accountability for folks, is that I really want the ability for that posting of the agenda to be on the website, for the city of Pauls Valley to share it through their social media platform with a link to it so that people can get easy, direct access. And then, you basically have from Friday until the Tuesday where we can use the new app that's being created by the city for the city of Pauls Valley to basically go in and say, I would like to speak on this specific agenda item. And the reason that is that we do have visitor comments that occur at the end of a city council meeting. However, all of the voted agenda items would have been discussed and voted on without public comment. And I know that people can come and talk to us from the time that they see it on Friday until the Tuesday meeting. However, I feel like the ability for somebody to come in and have a time limited span, we don't want to make the meeting overly long than it needs to be, but to where you have 2 minutes. And you can even limit the number of people that sort of come in and say, we're going to limit it to 4 or 5 sort of public comments. And I think that would be a really key thing where people can have a say. And you might see discussion sway. You may see an item tabled because there's enough opposition or things in favor of. And so from that perspective, I'm hugely in favor of both the live stream and the public comments being associated and the ability to get on the agenda following its posting on Friday. And so I think that's a huge thing. The other thing was we talked about how do you plan to improve or maintain the quality of local roads and water supply and sewer systems? Well, I think, one aspect of it is you have to make sure that you have enough revenue from the tax base to be able to support said things. When you look at the budget line items, or not budget, but more of the audit from 2023, it basically cost us about, 1.7 million to operate, certain aspects of, Sewer Street, about a little over $1 million, for water. And if you look at like some of the things that are associated with use tax that pays for those things, they really are fairly neutral. However, there are upgrades that need to occur to be able to maintain the infrastructure of a city that's, as old as ours. And so I think that that's happening with mapping. You're seeing water mapping of all the water lines. You're seeing sewer mapping doing the same thing. And so that gives us like a 10-year window to be able to do repairs, not just to the water plant, not just to the sewer treatment facility, but also to the actual infrastructure of the lines that are underneath the grounds upon which we are. And so I think that's a huge thing. But again, revenue and appropriate budget management is key. We sort of look at where we were in regards to the budget for 2024. We probably overestimated our budget for revenue by about $2 million, which set our expense line item at that $2 million peak above. Again, we generate about $8 to $8.4 million a year in tax revenue, to the city. That a portion of that via, the 4.5% sales or tax portion of ours goes to run those things with government and other associated entities. And so from that perspective, we were budgeted for almost, 10.4 million, and it raised our overall expense line item for how much we're spending for the entire year. And so we're doing budget cuts now, which is great. And it's not great for the city in general or for anyone that job may be affected. But at the end of the day, you have to be sort of financially neutral and be able to pay for the things that you do. And so I think that, finance is a huge part of taking care of local roads and water supply. You talk about, what steps will you take to support local businesses, and how would you encourage new business to open in Pauls Valley? So something that I was really, in support of, with the local businesses that are already in existence, I think that we need to have a certain forum. We need the ability, somebody's kind of pulling in the driveway. We need to have a certain ability to have a forum where city businesses can meet and discuss the challenges that they're having. Leadership is essentially the ability, it's my son. Do you want to get on the YouTube Live, Jacob?
No.
Jacob is out on the YouTube Live. Do you have any thoughts on government?
You should vote for my dad.
He says that you should vote for me. I would second that. I think that's an official motion. A second. Elijah Gamble is also down. Are you registered to vote?
I'm not old enough, but I would.
Okay. Next go around, you're there. Okay. There we go. I appreciate you, sir. So as we're thinking about the local business forum, I think leadership, in my mind, is service and the ability to remove barriers for those that are trying to accomplish something. And I think that for local businesses, the ability to have a liaison from the council or a forum where people come together either on a quarterly basis, a semi-annual basis, to meet. And any of the businesses in town can meet to talk about the challenges that are going on in regards to their business. And so from that perspective, I think that shared knowledge, that leverage knowledge, that collaboration can allow us to help increase revenue dollars. Additionally, I think that having billboards, both digital and traditional, north and south of Pauls Valley to really tell people what's there is a huge, huge thing. And again, I know this was an issue that came up before. People don't want, certain illumination into their yards or their property. I understand that. But I feel like we can go far enough north and south and reach out to Landmark or some of these other billboard companies to be able to put something in. And I think that the city could leverage one of those and utilize it to advertise, the related events like Okie Noodling, Brickfest, any of the events that are going on in the city. And I think that'll help bring revenue dollars to the city as well. And I think that's a huge tourism boom. You talk about new businesses. What can we do to support them? Essentially we can do, some kind of tax abatement, for them for a prorated period of time in their first year. We could do utility reductions because again, one of the greatest, sort of factors that you have in your expense line item is usually salaries, wages, and benefits. However, the ability to reduce your utility rate, the ability to reduce the tax that you pay, and to have expedited permits because build-out costs are astronomical since COVID in 2020. So the ability to have expedited permitting allows contractors to move faster, thereby making overall projects from a white box to an actual storefront occur at a much, much faster rate. An additional thing that we sort of talked about was this idea of a TIF. And so I think TIF, incremental sort of funding for industrial district improvements is a huge thing because it comes from sort of ad valorem or property taxes. So the ability for the city to take a tax that already exists, it's not a new tax, it's not an additional tax, it's taking the money that's there and allocating it back into the district for infrastructure. So whether that's roads that are platted, whether that's additional, build out so other industry would want to come to town is a huge, huge thing. So I'm a big, big fan of TIF dollars, right? But again, I think the public should have a vote on that. I think the public should have a say on that. And that's a huge thing that I think that we can do to help business. We talked about how do you plan to address any public safety concerns within a community, especially regarding crime rates. Well, we talked about the Pauls Valley app that's coming out that's been turned in. It's on the Apple Store. You can download it. I currently have it, and I like what I'm seeing there. But I know that you can notify things like water leaks, road issues, and it creates an invoicing system that ensures that certain activities are completed. So kudos to the city of Pauls Valley and the council and the city manager for getting that project moved forward. However, I think that as you're building this out, you can have a functionality just like I have the phone in my hand to where most people, when they see something and they're a little bit unsure, they're not going to, dial 911, I'm unsure. Contacting the police department, I'm unsure if I want to do that. And so from that perspective, using your phone and just being able to use simple, technology of the app to notify at the corner of, Walnut and Ash or whatever, that we may have a problem. You're not saying that specifically a crime's occurring, or maybe you are seeing a crime, but alerts police to be able to get there and take care of that. In addition to that, I think, even as I'm sitting out here, it's a little bit darker, I have a lot of lights on my property. And I think that helps, mitigate, theft. And theft is one of the primary sort of, low collar kind of crimes that occurs in Pauls Valley, in addition to some of the drug trade. And so I think that if you have more illumination on city streets throughout all the neighborhoods of Pauls Valley, that would be a welcome thing. And again, the public citizens need to have a say on that. Maybe there's a certain type of LED technology that doesn't shine lights into certain people's property. That's something that can easily be done. Is there a retrofit of existing lights? As far as that goes, I think that's something that can be done. But I think looking through town and seeing, can we illuminate certain areas to minimize the ability to hide the things that they're doing? Additionally, we talk about using the app. You can have a sort of a group text that you can subscribe to for town, that if the city, once they have a report of something and something is validated, the city could literally say, hey, we have this occurring. Hopefully it's not a shooting. Maybe it's a theft. Maybe it's an assault. Maybe it's a drug-related issue. But we don't want to put that onto the City of Pauls Valley social media page. However, we could 110%, operate through a subscribed group text where people can get updates about what's going on in their town, their neighborhood, their street, and potentially the house that's next door to them. And so from that perspective, I think that if that sort of transparency is occurring, crime will diminish because people don't want to have things associated with them in their neighborhood if they're the ones perpetrating it. And I think that that's the greatest sort of transparency you can operate that way, and crime rates will decrease. We talked about, in my mind, is there a possibility that some of the national security companies like a Blink or a Ring, and, for full disclosure, I have a security system on all of my businesses. I have cameras on many. I operate with the security system and cameras and floodlights on my current property. It's illuminated well because I feel like it decreases crime, right? You're trying to keep your family safe. You're trying to keep your business safe. Is there a way that we can go through and look at, a national subscriber like Blink, Ring, Simply Safe, where they can give a reduction to citizens of a certain municipality? And again, try to make things more affordable for people to be able to add them to their businesses, to their homes, to protect their, things that are near and dear to them, whether their business or their family. And I think that's a huge thing. And that's something I'm going to invest in, looking at, commit to kind of letting you guys know where we are with that, as far as that goes. The final question was, how would you encourage collaboration between local government and community organizations to meet residents' needs? And one of the things that I think that really jumps out to me here is the idea of collaboration, and so from that perspective, give you an example. I'm the president of the Pauls Valley Parks Foundation. And so we've done, a bunch of things through town. Primarily the thing that will jump out to people is the tennis court resurfacing and renovation that we did on the east side of Wacker Park, just east of Chickasaw. We also have helped with TSET as well as the Pickleball Association, PVTRA, to get shadow lines there. We do racket checkout. We do pickleball checkout. Again, this is something that we've sort of done. The reason I mention that, it's been a collaborative effort. So between Pauls Valley Parks, PVTRA, the City of Pauls Valley, TSET, have leveraged these sort of things to be able to get things done. Well, I think that if we had liaisons, maybe a president of each organization, if we had like a quarterly meeting to talk about an overall visioning process or where we're going, similar projects that we're working on, you would be surprised at how much most of the things that I see happen that get accomplished are through people from different groups that have different points of view and different advantages, if you will, knowledge of certain grants or knowledge of certain things that are going on in town that can be leveraged to kind of move projects forward. And I think that this is a huge, huge thing. So again, whether that's like a forum, we were talking about like a business, but it's just for like some of the boards, whether it's beautification, whether it's PV Parks Foundation, whether it's, planning and zoning, where people can collaborate about a visioning process that again, I think is probably well overdue. And so I think that's a huge thing as well. And I think with that being said, I'm already at 17 minutes. I'm sort of looking, seeing if there's any questions in the chat. There's just some people saying hi. Hello, people. Someone's telling me that they were my first like and they've subscribed. And so I will tell you, we'll probably shut this down here. The next live that I'm going to do on YouTube is going to be tomorrow night after the city council meeting. It's going to be 6 p.m., the city council at City Hall. Definitely get there and check it out. On the previous YouTube live that I did, the podcast, we went over the agenda and we talked about some of those things. I'll have some additional commentary, I'm sure, from the meeting. But again, you can use the link that I shared, and then I'm going to take this video and I'm going to put it on the playlist for city government. So if you ever want to go back and look at something, you go to my channel, you go to the playlist for city government, you'll be able to see any of these things. So again, I appreciate all of you guys who have sort of jumped on here tonight. It's good to be able to talk to you guys, and you guys have a good night, and God bless.